I am Paulette Hamilton, 68 years old, and a retired high school teacher from Portland. My son Jacob was once the greatest joy of my life. That was until I discovered he had been telling his friends, colleagues, and even his fiancée that I died of cancer 5 years ago. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could. So I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. I showed up at his wedding with my lawyer. If you have ever felt betrayed by someone you loved with your whole heart, drop a comment below about how you handled it. Do not forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength when family lets you down. For 35 years, I dedicated my life to teaching high school English in Portland. I loved my students, but no one compared to my son Jacob. I had him when I was 31, relatively late for the early 1980s. His father Richard was charming but ultimately unreliable. He abandoned us when Jacob was just 2 years old, leaving nothing but a handwritten note and empty promises. Those early years were tough financially. Raising a child alone in the 80s and 90s meant constant budgeting, careful planning, and many sleepless nights wondering if I was doing enough. My teacher's salary barely covered our basic needs, but I was determined to give Jacob everything I could. I still remember teaching Jacob to read when he was 4. We would sit on our worn blue couch every evening after dinner, his small body pressed against mine as we sounded out words in Dr. Seuss books. His face would light up with each new word he recognized, and I knew in those moments that all the struggle was worth it. Our weekends were sacred. Even when money was tight, we found free activities to enjoy together. The local museum had free admission on Sunday afternoons, and Jacob loved the dinosaur exhibits. He would stand in front of the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton, his neck craned all the way back, eyes wide with wonder, asking questions faster than I could answer them. Cooking together became our special ritual. By age 7, he could make scrambled eggs all by himself, standing on a step stool at the stove while I supervised closely. By 10, we had perfected our secret recipe for chocolate chip cookies with a hint of orange zest. The kitchen was small, but filled with laughter and connection. The sacrifices I made seemed natural at the time. I took extra tutoring jobs after school hours to save for his college fund. I postponed my master's degree twice, because the tuition money was better spent on his summer camps and school supplies. Our apartment was smaller than most of his friends' homes, but we made it cozy with books, plants, and framed photos of our adventures. Jacob rewarded my devotion by excelling in everything he tried. He was not just academically gifted, but kind and thoughtful too. His teachers constantly praised his work ethic and leadership abilities. When he was accepted to Princeton on a partial scholarship his senior year, I cried for hours from pure pride. I had done it, despite everything I had raised, a son who could reach for the stars. I worked 3 jobs that summer before he left for college to make sure he had everything he needed. New laptop, winter clothes for the East Coast weather dorm supplies. I wanted him to fit in with the wealthy students he would surely meet there. The day I dropped him off at campus was bittersweet. I was losing my daily companion, but gaining the satisfaction of seeing him step confidently into his future. During his college years, Jacob thrived. He majored in political science with a minor in economics, joined the debate team, and secured prestigious internships each summer. We talked at least twice a week, and though I missed him terribly, I was content knowing he was building a wonderful life. After graduation, he was recruited by a top law firm in New York City. The starting salary he mentioned casually over the phone was more than I had ever made in a year as a teacher. I felt no jealousy, only pure joy that my son would never have to struggle the way I had. Jacob met Amanda during his second year at the firm. She was from a wealthy Connecticut family, educated at private schools, and worked in art acquisition for museums. The first time he mentioned her, his voice changed. It became softer, more vulnerable. I recognized the sound of falling in love and was thrilled for him. 3 years ago, Jacob called me on a Sunday morning. I knew something was different because he usually called in the evenings. His voice was bursting with excitement as he announced that he had proposed to Amanda the night before, at a rooftop restaurant overlooking Central Park. She had said yes. I remember sinking into my kitchen chair, tears of joy streaming down my face. My boy, my beautiful boy, had found someone to build a life with. I immediately started thinking about wedding plans, about finally having an extended family, about potential grandchildren. At 65, I was ready for a new chapter in my life that included being a grandmother. When I first met Amanda a month later, she seemed warm and genuine. She hugged me tightly at the restaurant where we had lunch, admiring the handmade scarf I had brought her as a gift. She asked thoughtful questions about Jacob as a child, and I happily shared stories that made him blush and protest playfully. "Your son is amazing, Paulette," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Now I know where he gets it from." That comment sustained me for weeks. I began researching apartments in New York, thinking I might move closer once they were married. I imagined Sunday dinners together, holding future grandchildren, being part of their lives in a meaningful way. After decades of it being just Jacob and me against the world, I was ready to expand our small family circle. I updated my will, started organizing my possessions, and even took a weekend trip to look at senior living communities within a 30-minute drive of their New York apartment. Everything was falling into place, exactly as I had always hoped it would. The first sign that something was wrong came gradually. Jacob became less available for our weekly phone calls. When we did speak, the conversations were shorter, more superficial. He often seemed distracted or in a hurry. "Is everything okay at work?" I asked during one particularly brief call. "Just busy, Mom. Big case. I will call you next week when things settle down." But things never seemed to settle down. Weeks would pass with just text messages between us. I told myself this was normal. He was building his career and relationship. I needed to give him space. About 2 months after meeting, Amanda Jacob called with news that initially delighted me. Amanda's parents want to host Christmas this year at their home in Connecticut. They have a big family gathering every year. "That sounds wonderful," I said, already imagining a picture-perfect holiday with my new extended family. "Yeah, they go all out. Tree in every room, professional decorations, the works." I waited for the invitation details, but they never came. The conversation shifted to other topics. Finally, I asked directly, "So, should I book a flight to Connecticut for Christmas? I would love to meet Amanda's family." There was a pause, just a beat too long. "Actually, Mom, I think this year it might be better if you did your usual Christmas with Aunt Marjorie. Amanda's family events can be overwhelming. Lots of people. Family politics. Maybe next year, when you have met everyone individually first." I swallowed my disappointment. "Of course, honey. Whatever you think is best." After we hung up, I sat in my living room, staring at the small artificial tree I had used for the past decade, wondering what Christmas would be like in Amanda's family home. Would there be children running around? Would her mother make special recipes passed down through generations? I pushed aside my sadness and called my sister Marjorie to confirm our usual quiet Christmas plans. In January, I decided to reach out to Amanda's mother on social media. I found her easily, Margaret Whitfield, an elegant-looking woman who posted frequently about charity events and family gatherings. I sent a simple friend request with a message introducing myself as Jacob's mother and expressing how happy I was about the engagement. Her response came 2 days later and left me confused. "Thank you for reaching out, Paulette. I am so sorry for your family's loss. Jacob is a wonderful young man, and we are blessed to have him joining our family. Amanda has told me how difficult these past years have been for him." Loss. What loss? I read the message several times, wondering if she had confused me with someone else. When I mentioned it to Jacob, he dismissed it quickly. "Just a misunderstanding, Mom. You know how these social media communications can get mixed up. Do not worry about it." But I did worry. Something felt off, though I could not quite place what it was. Over the next few months, invitations to visit Jacob and Amanda in New York became rare. When I did visit, there was a strained quality to our interactions. Amanda, once warm and engaging, now seemed uncomfortable around me. Jacob would frequently check his phone during our conversations, as if looking for an excuse to end our time together. During one visit, Jacob introduced me to a colleague they ran into at a restaurant. "This is Paulette, my dad's ex-wife," he said, rather than my mom. The phrasing struck me as odd, but I did not correct him in front of a stranger. Another time, when Amanda's parents called during our lunch, Jacob stepped away from the table to take the call. When he returned, Amanda asked quietly, "Did they want to talk to me?" "No," he replied. "Just confirming plans for the foundation gala next month." I noticed how he positioned his body slightly away from me, as he spoke, as if creating a physical barrier between his two worlds. Conversations about family history became increasingly awkward. When I mentioned Jacob's childhood asthma during a discussion about health, Amanda looked confused. "I did not know you had asthma as a child," she said to Jacob. "It was mild," he replied quickly. "Hardly worth mentioning." But it had not been mild at all. There had been frightening midnight trips to the emergency room, a nebulizer we carried everywhere, and careful monitoring of triggers. It was a significant part of our early years together, yet he dismissed it entirely. One evening, while staying at their apartment, I overheard Jacob on the phone in his office. I had gotten up for a glass of water and paused in the hallway when I heard my name. "No, it is complicated with Paulette," he was saying in a low voice. "I cannot really explain right now. We will figure it out before the wedding." Figure what out? What was complicated about me? I returned to the guest room with a sense of unease growing in my chest. As their wedding plans progressed, my attempts to stay connected met with increasing resistance. Jacob always had reasons why now was not a good time for a visit. Work was busy. Amanda was stressed about wedding details. They were traveling for business. Each excuse seemed reasonable on its own, but together they formed a pattern I could not ignore. Still, I tried to maintain our relationship. I found a beautiful set of baby clothes at an artisan fair hand knitted with organic cotton. I bought them as a gift, hoping they might be used for my grandchildren someday. When I mailed them to Jacob with a note about family traditions, he thanked me briefly via text. No follow-up, no deeper conversation about their plans for children. The distance between us grew despite my efforts. Our phone calls, once full of shared stories and laughter, became formal and brief. I found myself rehearsing topics beforehand, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Then came a disturbing comment that should have alerted me to the truth. I ran into Carol, a former teaching colleague, at the supermarket. When I mentioned Jacob's upcoming wedding, her face registered surprise. "Oh, I thought your son was orphaned young. Someone mentioned he lost his mother during college." I laughed it off. "Well, as you can see, I am very much alive." She looked embarrassed. I must have confused him with someone else. How wonderful about the wedding. I dismissed the incident, but it left a shadow in my mind. Why would anyone think Jacob was an orphan? Where would such a specific piece of misinformation come from? I should have pressed harder, asked more questions. But sometimes the truth is so unthinkable that our minds protect us from seeing it even when the evidence is right in front of us. The moment the full truth began to unravel came on an ordinary Tuesday at Martin's grocery store on Elm Street. I was comparing prices on canned tomatoes when someone called my name. I turned to see Thomas Chen, Jacob's roommate from Princeton, staring at me as if he had seen a ghost. "Mrs. Hamilton, Paulette Hamilton," his face had gone pale. "Thomas, how lovely to see you. How are you doing these days?" Still, with that investment firm, I moved to hug him, but he stepped back, his shopping basket clutched tightly against his chest. "You are alive," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I laughed, thinking he was making a strange joke. Last time I checked. Why would you think otherwise? His expression grew serious, confused. "Jacob told us you died from breast cancer. Years ago. He said it happened during our junior year." The fluorescent lights of the grocery store suddenly seemed too bright. The ground felt unsteady beneath my feet. "That is ridiculous," I said, my voice sounding far away, even to my own ears. "As you can see, I am perfectly healthy." Thomas looked mortified. "I am so sorry. I do not know why he would. There must be some mistake. He showed us photos from your funeral. He took a week off classes. We all sent sympathy cards." I gripped the shopping cart for support. There must be a misunderstanding. Jacob would never say such a thing. But even as I defended my son, a cold realization was spreading through my body. All the strange comments, the distance, Amanda's mother's odd message about loss. Pieces were falling into place, forming a picture too painful to acknowledge. I thanked Thomas awkwardly and left my half-filled cart in the aisle. In my car, I sat motionless for 20 minutes, trying to process what I had just learned. There had to be an explanation. Perhaps Thomas was confused. Perhaps he had misunderstood something Jacob said about Richard, his absent father. When I got home, I did something I had never done before. I searched for Jacob on social media and scrolled back through his posts. I had an account but rarely used it, preferring phone calls for keeping in touch. What I found shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. There, from 3 years ago, was a Mother's Day post with an old photo of me holding Jacob as a toddler. The caption read, "Missing you every day, Mom, especially today. Cancer took you too soon, but your spirit lives on in everything I do. I hope I am making you proud up there." The post had dozens of sympathetic comments from friends and colleagues. Jacob had responded to many, thanking people for their support during his difficult journey without her. With shaking hands, I kept searching. I found an online memorial page with my name and photo, an obituary on a digital archive, scattered references to being raised by family friends after losing both parents young. Both parents. He had erased Richard, too, creating for himself the narrative of an orphan who had overcome adversity through his own strength and determination. I tried calling Jacob immediately. The call went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice trembling with emotion. "Jacob, it is Mom. I just ran into Thomas Chen. We need to talk right away. Please call me back as soon as you get this." He did not call back. Not that day, not the next. After 3 days of silence, I made a decision. I would drive to New York and confront him in person. This was too important for text messages and voicemails. The 6-hour drive gave me plenty of time to cycle through emotions. Disbelief, anger, heartbreak, confusion. By the time I parked near their apartment building, I had settled into a numb determination to understand why my son had erased me from his life. The doorman would not let me up. "Mr. Hamilton is not expecting visitors today." "I am his mother," I insisted. The doorman looked uncomfortable. "I am sorry, ma'am. I have strict instructions about Mr. Hamilton's approved visitors. Your name is not on the list." I sat in the lobby for 4 hours, calling Jacob repeatedly. Finally, I left a handwritten note with the doorman and drove to a nearby hotel, emotionally exhausted. That evening, I received an email from Jacob. Not a call, an email. "Mom, I got your messages. This is not a good time for us. Amanda and I are under a lot of pressure with work and wedding planning. We need space right now. I will call when things calm down. Please do not come to our apartment unannounced again." No explanation. No acknowledgement of the lie. Just a cold request for space, as if I were an overbearing mother who did not respect boundaries rather than a woman who had just discovered her son had been telling people she was dead for years. I spent the next 2 days in the hotel room digging deeper. With the help of the hotel's business center computer, I found more evidence of Jacob's fabricated history. Social media posts about being an orphan who had overcome adversity. Professional profiles that mentioned being raised by family friends after tragedy struck early. A feature in a legal magazine that praised his resilience after losing his mother to cancer during his college years. Through careful research and a few strategic phone calls to mutual acquaintances, I learned more disturbing details. Jacob had apparently told Amanda's parents that I had died when he was 17. According to his story, he had been taken in by family friends who helped him get into Princeton despite his difficult circumstances. The depth of the deception was staggering. But why? What could possibly motivate my son to erase me so completely? A conversation with our old neighbor Sandra provided a possible answer. She had attended the same charity event as Amanda's parents the previous year and had been introduced briefly. Old money, Paulette. Serious old money. The kind that goes back generations. Whitfield Banking has been a Connecticut institution since the 1800s. They fund half the arts programs in New England. Their family foundation gives millions to charity every year. I thought about Jacob, raised by a single mother teacher in a modest apartment. How would that story play in the circles he now moved in? Had he been so ashamed of his background of me that he had created a more palatable narrative for his new life? The thought was too painful to bear alone. I called my sister Marjorie, my voice breaking as I explained what I had discovered. "You need a lawyer," was her immediate response. "This is not just hurtful, it is defamation. He has been lying about you to everyone in his life." "I do not want to sue my son, Marjorie." "Maybe not, but you need someone to advocate for you. This is serious, Paulette." I returned to Portland with a heaviness in my heart I had never experienced before. Not even Richard's abandonment had hurt this much. At least he had just left. He had not pretended I never existed. Back home, I reached out to Thomas Chen again, asking if we could meet for coffee. His discomfort was evident, but he agreed. "Jacob told everyone at Princeton that you died during junior year," he confirmed. He said it was aggressive breast cancer that had been diagnosed too late. He even took a week off for the funeral. Our friends collected money to send flowers. And no one ever questioned this. No one ever met me during parent weekends or graduation. Thomas looked down at his coffee cup. He always said it was too painful to have anyone from school at home events. And he mentioned being raised by family friends after you passed. We assumed they were the older couple who came to graduation. Family friends. An older couple at graduation. I had attended his Princeton graduation alone, sitting in the audience bursting with pride. Who had been there pretending to be his surrogate family. "Do you have photos from graduation?" I asked. Thomas pulled out his phone and scrolled through an old photo album. There was Jacob in his cap and gown standing between an elegant, gray-haired couple I had never seen before in my life. "He called them Uncle Stephen and Aunt Caroline," Thomas said. "I assumed they were family friends who took him in." The fabrication seemed endless, each new discovery more painful than the last. How long had this been going on? How many people believed I was dead? Through social media, I discovered the wedding was scheduled for just 3 months away at the Whitfield family estate in Connecticut. An elaborate affair with 500 guests featured in a wedding planning magazine as one of the most anticipated social events of the season. I had not received an invitation. Of course I hadn't. Dead women do not attend weddings. As weeks passed without any contact from Jacob, the reality of my situation became increasingly clear. Not only was I not invited to my only child's wedding, but the entire event was being planned around the premise that I did not exist. I found their wedding registry online. Expensive crystal fine china silver flatware. Items costing more than my monthly pension. I browsed through their wedding website, admiring the beautiful photos of the happy couple against Manhattan skylines and autumn foliage in Central Park. And then I saw it. A section titled "In Loving Memory" with a photo of me from at least 15 years earlier. The accompanying text read, "We remember those who cannot be with us on our special day. Jacob's mother, Paulette, who lost her heroic battle with cancer in 2008. Her spirit lives on in Jacob's compassion, intelligence, and strength of character. We know she would be proud of the man he has become and the love he has found." Something inside me broke. The careful composure I had maintained through all the previous discoveries shattered completely. I printed the page and spread it on my kitchen table, staring at my own premature memorial. For a full week I barely ate or slept. I moved through my house like a ghost, the irony not lost on me. In my son's narrative, I was a ghost. A sad story to earn sympathy, a tragic backdrop to highlight his resilience. My friend Gloria came over after I missed our weekly book club. She found me surrounded by printed evidence of Jacob's deception eyes swollen from crying. "This is beyond unacceptable," she said after I explained everything. "You need to fight back." "How do you fight something like this?" I asked, gesturing helplessly at the papers scattered around us. "He is my son, my only child." "A son who has erased you from existence," Gloria said firmly. "Who is letting his fiancée and her family believe a complete lie. Who has apparently been lying about you for years. You deserve better, Paulette. And frankly, so does Amanda. She is about to marry someone capable of sustaining an enormous deception. Does she know who she is really marrying?" Gloria's words struck a chord. This wasn't just about me anymore. There was a young woman preparing to build a life with my son, unaware of his capacity for elaborate lies. Did she deserve to make such an important decision based on false information? The next day, I contacted Frank Sullivan, a family lawyer I had worked with years earlier on my will. I laid out the situation as calmly as I could, showing him the evidence I had collected. "This is an unusual case," he admitted, "but there are potential legal issues here. Defamation, certainly. Emotional distress. We could potentially file for an injunction regarding the false statements on the wedding website." "I do not want to sue my son," I said, for what felt like the 100th time. "I just want him to acknowledge the truth." "Sometimes legal pressure is the only way to achieve that," Frank replied. "Let me look into your options." For the next 2 weeks, I gathered evidence, screenshots of social media posts, testimonials from friends who had heard about my death, copies of the wedding website and obituary. Each new item felt like another small betrayal, another piece of my existence erased. During a sleepless night, I made my decision. I would not allow myself to be erased. I would not let Jacob's lies stand unchallenged. This was not just about my relationship with him anymore. It was about my fundamental right to exist in the narrative of my own life. I researched Amanda's family more thoroughly. The Whitfields were indeed banking royalty with a family fortune dating back to the 19th century. They moved in the highest social circles, their names regularly appearing in charity gala photos and society page headlines. They donated buildings to universities and had museum wings named after them. Had Jacob invented his orphan story to seem more acceptable to this family, to erase his connection to a middle-class single-mother teacher from Portland? The thought was both painful and infuriating. I sought a second legal opinion this time from Margaret Williams, an attorney specializing in defamation cases. She was direct and clear about my options. "You have a strong case for defamation," she confirmed. "False statements of fact that harm your reputation. We can document actual damages to relationships, but litigation is expensive, time-consuming, and very public. Is that what you want?" "I want my son to stop telling people I am dead," I said simply. "I want to exist." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. There might be another approach. Sometimes the mere threat of legal action can achieve the desired result without actually filing suit. We developed a strategy. Margaret would prepare legal documentation outlining the defamation case. We would appear at the wedding with this documentation, not to create a scene but to firmly establish the truth. My existence would no longer be deniable. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Margaret asked when we finalized the plan. "Appearing at the wedding will create a very public confrontation." "Jacob made this public when he told 500 people I died of cancer," I replied, finding strength in my anger. "He doesn't get to control the narrative anymore." Margaret prepared a formal legal letter demanding retraction of all false statements and public correction of the record. We gathered our evidence in a professional portfolio, organized and irrefutable. As the wedding date approached, I vacillated between determination and doubt. Was I doing the right thing? Would this destroy any chance of reconciliation with my son? But every time I looked at the in-loving memory page from the wedding website, my resolve hardened. I had spent 35 years pouring my heart and soul into raising Jacob. I had worked multiple jobs, sacrificed my own dreams, supported him through every challenge. I deserved to exist in his story. 3 nights before the wedding, I barely slept. I kept imagining Jacob's face when he saw me. Would there be shame, anger, relief? Some small part of me still hoped for a simple explanation, some misunderstanding that could be cleared up with honest conversation. But the evidence was too substantial, the deception too elaborate for any innocent explanation. My son had been telling people I was dead for years, and in 3 days I would confront that painful truth in front of everyone he knew. The day of the wedding dawned clear and cool, a perfect early October day in Connecticut. I dressed carefully in a navy blue suit, professional and dignified, nothing flashy or attention-seeking. This was not about creating drama, but about asserting truth. Margaret picked me up at my hotel at 1 in the afternoon. The ceremony was scheduled for 4, but we wanted to arrive during the pre-ceremony gathering. Timing would be crucial for our plan to work. "Are you ready for this?" Margaret asked as we drove through the picturesque Connecticut countryside toward the Whitfield estate. "As ready as I will ever be," I replied, clutching my handbag, which contained photos of Jacob's childhood, my ID, and other proof of my identity and relationship to him. The Whitfield estate was exactly as impressive as I had imagined. A sprawling property with manicured gardens, a main house that looked like it belonged in a historical film, and a large white tent set up for the reception. Luxury cars filled the long driveway, and well-dressed guests were already arriving. Security personnel stood at the entrance to the property. Margaret approached them confidently, explaining that we had urgent business with the groom. When they hesitated, she presented her business card and mentioned potential legal issues that would be better addressed privately before the ceremony. "We can either discuss this quietly now," she said firmly, "or more publicly later. I believe the family would prefer discretion." Her professional demeanor and implied threat of greater disruption worked. We were escorted to a side entrance of the main house where a frazzled wedding coordinator met us. "The family is taking photos in the East Garden," she explained. "The ceremony starts in less than 2 hours. Whatever this is about, can it wait until tomorrow?" "I am afraid not," Margaret replied. This concerns information the groom has been sharing about his family that requires immediate correction. And you are the coordinator, asked me directly. Paulette Hamilton, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Jacob's mother. The woman's face went through a series of expressions. Confusion, shock, disbelief. That is not possible. Jacob's mother passed away many years ago. There is a memorial table at the reception. I handed her my driver's license. As you can see, I am very much alive. The coordinator excused herself quickly, phone already in hand. We waited in a beautifully appointed sitting room, tension building with each passing minute. 10 minutes later, the door opened. A tall man in an expensive suit entered, his face a mask of professional concern. I am Howard Whitfield, Amanda's father, he said. I understand there is some confusion about Jacob's family history. Margaret stepped forward. There is no confusion, Mr. Whitfield. Only deliberate deception. My client, Paulette Hamilton, is Jacob's mother. She is very much alive, despite what your future son-in-law has told everyone. Howard looked at me closely. You claim to be Jacob's mother. I do not claim to be. I am. I have birth certificates, photographs, school records, and 35 witnesses from Portland who can verify our relationship. A flash of anger crossed his face. If this is true, why would he? The door opened again. Jacob stood there, handsome in his tuxedo, his face draining of color as our eyes met. Mom, he whispered, his voice a mixture of shock and fear. What are you doing here? Howard turned to him sharply. You know this woman. Your mother is not dead. Before Jacob could respond, a flurry of activity behind him revealed several more people entering the room. Amanda, beautiful, in a designer dress, her mother, and what appeared to be the wedding photographer. Jacob, they are ready for the next set of family photos. Amanda began, then stopped abruptly when she saw me. Who is this? The moment stretched into painful silence. Jacob looked trapped, his eyes darting between me, Amanda, and his future in-laws. I stepped forward, extending my hand to Amanda. I am Paulette Hamilton, Jacob's mother. I believe there has been a significant misunderstanding about my existence. Amanda looked confused, then horrified as understanding dawned. Your mother died of cancer. You told me she died when you were in college. He told everyone that, I said quietly. But as you can see, I am very much alive. The room erupted into chaos. Amanda turned to Jacob, demanding an explanation. Her parents moved protectively closer to their daughter. The photographer discreetly backed out of the room. Jacob raised his hands, attempting to gain control of the situation. I can explain. This is all a misunderstanding. Margaret stepped forward, opening her portfolio. Perhaps these will help clarify things. Social media posts about your mother's alleged death. An obituary you wrote. Memorial statements on your wedding website. All describing events that never happened, about a death that never occurred. Jacob's stammering attempts at explanation were painful to witness. It was just easier. Amanda's family has such a distinguished background. I wanted to fit in. Fit, in Howard Whitfield's voice, was cold with fury. By inventing a dead mother. By lying to our entire family for 3 years. Amanda had moved away from Jacob, tears streaming down her face. All those times you talked about losing her, about how it shaped you. Was any of it true? Mandy, please, Jacob begged. Let's talk privately. I can explain everything. I think you should explain right here, I said firmly. You made this public when you told all these people I was dead. So the resolution should be public too. Margaret presented our documentation to Howard. We have prepared a formal demand for retraction of defamatory statements. We would prefer to resolve this without litigation, but my client has the right to protect her reputation and existence. Jacob moved toward me, his voice low and urgent. Mom, please, not like this. Let me handle this my way. Your way, I asked, surprised by how calm I felt. Your way was to erase me from your life, to tell people I died a tragic death, to invent surrogate parents. Your way has been nothing but lies. Amanda had taken the portfolio from her father and was paging through the evidence, her expression hardening with each document she reviewed. Who are these people? She asked, pointing to a graduation photo with the older couple. Jacob's face crumpled. Actors, he whispered. I hired them for graduation. A collective gasp filled the room. Amanda pulled off her engagement ring and placed it on a side table with deliberate care. "The wedding is off," she announced, her voice shaking but determined. "I cannot marry someone I do not know. And I clearly do not know you at all, Jacob." Howard stepped forward. "I suggest we make an announcement to the guests. The staff can begin arranging transportation for anyone who needs it." Jacob made one more desperate attempt. "Mr. Whitfield, please. I love your daughter. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but my feelings for Amanda are completely genuine." Howard looked at him with undisguised contempt. "A mistake is forgetting an appointment or miscalculating a figure. What you did was sustain an elaborate fraud for years. You allowed my daughter to build a relationship on complete falsehood. You disrespected this woman, your own mother, in the most fundamental way possible." He turned to his wife. "Margaret, please take Amanda upstairs. I will handle the announcement." As Amanda left the room supported by her mother, she paused briefly beside me. "I am so sorry," she said softly. "I had no idea." In that moment, I felt no satisfaction, only sadness for this young woman whose dreams had just been shattered. "Neither of us knew who he really was," I replied. Within an hour, an announcement had been made to the wedding guests that the ceremony was postponed indefinitely due to unforeseen circumstances. The elegant crowd dispersed in a buzz of speculation and concern. Howard Whitfield, maintaining remarkable composure given the circumstances, invited Margaret and me to join him in his study. Jacob followed uninvited but unhindered. The study was exactly what one would expect from a banking dynasty patriarch. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, oil paintings of stern-looking ancestors. It would have been intimidating under normal circumstances. But after what I had just been through, it seemed merely a backdrop for the real drama unfolding. Amanda arrived shortly after having changed from her wedding gown into a simple dress. Her mother accompanied her, both women exhibiting the kind of dignified restraint that comes from generations of handling difficult social situations with grace. Howard closed the door. "I believe we all deserve a complete explanation," he said, looking directly at Jacob. "No more lies, no more evasions." Jacob sat heavily in a chair, looking suddenly much younger than his 37 years. For a moment I saw the little boy who would confess to breaking a rule, his face a mixture of shame and relief at finally telling the truth. "I met Amanda at a charity event," he began. "I knew immediately who she was, who her family was. Everyone in New York financial circles knows the Whitfields. When she showed interest in me, I panicked. I was just a scholarship kid from Oregon, with a single mom teacher. I thought if she knew the truth, she would not take me seriously." "So you invented a tragic backstory instead," Amanda asked, her voice hollow. Jacob nodded miserably. "I mentioned losing my mother to cancer, thinking it was just a small lie to explain why I never talked about my family. But then you invited me to meet your parents, and they were so kind, so sympathetic about my loss. The lie grew from there. And the fake surrogate family. The actors at graduation," I asked, still struggling to understand the extent of his deception. "After I told everyone at Princeton you had died, I couldn't bring you to graduation. It would have exposed everything. So I hired a couple to pose as family friends who raised me. I paid them for the day." "Margaret," my lawyer spoke up. "Mr. Hamilton, do you understand that what you have done constitutes identity, erasure, and defamation? You have made false statements of fact that damaged your mother's reputation and relationships. There are serious legal consequences for such actions." Jacob looked at me pleadingly. "I never meant to hurt you, Mom. It just spiraled out of control. Once I started, I couldn't find a way to undo it without losing everything. Without losing Amanda." Amanda wiped away a tear. "You lost me because of the lie, Jacob, not because of your background. Did you really think so little of me that you believed I would reject you because your mother was a teacher, because you didn't come from money?" It wasn't just that Jacob admitted. It was everything. The small apartment we lived in, the second-hand clothes I wore growing up, the fact that I worked serving tables to help pay for college expenses while my classmates took luxury vacations. I wanted to be someone else, someone worthy of you. "You were worthy," Amanda said softly, "until you started lying." Howard stepped forward. "I have built my career on assessing character, young man. Do you know what I value above all else in my business partners and in my family? Honesty. Integrity. Without those, all the education and accomplishments in the world mean nothing. Jacob's shoulders slumped in defeat. I understand, and I accept whatever legal consequences come from this. Mom, I'll make a public statement correcting everything. I'll tell everyone the truth. Margaret outlined what would be required. A complete retraction of all false statements. Public correction on all platforms where the false information was shared. A commitment to therapy to address the underlying issues that led to this behavior. And a legally binding agreement not to make any further false statements about Paulette in the future. Jacob nodded, accepting each requirement without protest. Is that what you want? Paulette Howard asked me directly. Legal remedies. I looked at my son, this person. I had raised with such love and hope. What I want is understanding. I want to know why. Not the surface reasons, but the real truth. Why was I so easy to erase from your life? Jacob could not meet my eyes. You were never easy to erase, Mom. Every time I told the lie, I felt sick inside, but each time it got a little easier to pretend. And the story I created gave me something I thought I needed. What was that? I asked. A clean slate. No background to overcome, no struggling single mother narrative that made people see me as a charity case. Just a brave orphan who succeeded against the odds. People admire that story. They don't pity it. The distinction hit me hard. All those years had Jacob felt pitied rather than proud of our life together. Had I somehow communicated shame about our circumstances, rather than the fierce pride I actually felt in how we had managed together? Amanda spoke up, her voice stronger now. I fell in love with a lie. With someone who doesn't exist. I need time to process all of this. Her mother, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. Amanda, why don't you stay at the lake house for a few weeks? Give yourself space to think. Amanda nodded gratefully. She turned to me, genuine compassion in her eyes despite her own pain. I am truly sorry, Mrs. Hamilton. No one deserves what he did to you, especially not a mother. I was surprised when Margaret Whitfield approached me as we prepared to leave. I lost my own mother. Young, she said quietly. A real loss, not an invented one. I would give anything to have had more years with her. What Jacob did erasing you when you are still here to love him is incomprehensible to me. We left the estate with mixed emotions. The legal situation was moving toward resolution. Jacob had agreed to our terms, signing the documents Margaret had prepared. But the emotional damage was harder to quantify or address. In the parking area, Jacob ran after us, his tie undone, his perfect wedding appearance now disheveled. Mom, wait, he called. Please. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but please don't give up on me completely. I looked at my son, this stranger I had raised. Forgiveness has to be earned, Jacob. Not with words, but with actions, with truth. I won't give up on you because that's not what mothers do. But trust has to be rebuilt from the ground up. I'll do whatever it takes, he promised, his voice breaking. Therapy, public apologies, anything. Start with honesty, I said. With yourself most of all. Figure out why you were willing to erase your own mother to impress people whose opinion shouldn't matter more than family. As we drove away, I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and vindication. The truth was out. I existed again in my son's narrative. But the mother-son relationship I had cherished for nearly 4 decades was fundamentally altered, perhaps beyond repair. The days following the wedding confrontation were strangely empty. I had achieved what I set out to do. The truth was acknowledged. Jacob had agreed to all our terms. The legal issue was essentially resolved. Yet I felt hollow, as if a vital part of me had been removed. I returned to Portland and tried to resume my normal routines. Book club on Wednesdays, volunteer work at the library on Mondays and Fridays, morning walks around the neighborhood, but everything felt mechanical, performed, rather than lived. My sister Marjorie suggested I find a support group. There must be other parents who have experienced estrangement or betrayal, she reasoned. You shouldn't go through this alone. She was right. I found a group that met weekly at a community center downtown. Family Fractures Healing from Estrangement sounded clinical and impersonal, but the people I met there were anything but. Parents whose adult children had cut them off. Adult children rebuilding relationships with parents who had failed them. siblings trying to reconnect after years of silence. In that circle of folding chairs, I shared my story for the first time with people who had no connection to me or Jacob, people who could listen without judgment or preconceived notions. My son told everyone I was dead. I said the words still difficult to form. For years he pretended I didn't exist. Instead of the shocked reactions I had come to expect, I received nods of understanding. Not everyone had experienced exactly what I had, but they all understood the fundamental pain of being erased from a loved one's life. I also began seeing a therapist, Dr. Karen Levinson, who specialized in family trauma. Our sessions helped me process not just the recent betrayal, but the entire history of my relationship with Jacob. "You've built your identity around being Jacob's mother," Dr. Levinson observed during one session. "When he removed you from his narrative, he took away a core part of how you define yourself." "Isn't that normal?" I asked. "To define yourself partly through your relationship with your child?" "It's common," she agreed, "but not always healthy, especially when that child is an adult with his own life. Part of your healing will involve rediscovering who Paulette is outside of being Jacob's mother." It was a confronting thought. Who was I, if not the devoted single mother who had sacrificed everything for her son, who was Paulette Hamilton in her own right? About 3 weeks after the wedding, that wasn't I received an email from Jacob. I had been expecting it, but my heart still raced when I saw his name in my inbox. "Dear Mom," it began. "I don't know how to begin apologizing for what I've done. There are no words adequate to express my remorse, or to explain the inexcusable choices I made. I've started therapy as agreed. My therapist suggests I need to understand myself better before I can ask for your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I am committed to making amends however possible. When you're ready to talk, I am here." It was more than I had expected. There were no excuses, no attempts to minimize what he had done. Just a simple acknowledgement and a commitment to change. I responded carefully, neither rushing to forgive nor closing the door on reconciliation. "Jacob, thank you for your email. I appreciate your commitment to therapy and self-understanding. I need time and space to process everything that has happened. I hope you are finding clarity about the choices you made. We can talk when we're both ready." Over the following months, I focused on rebuilding my life. I reconnected with old friends who had fallen by the wayside during my years of devotion to Jacob. I joined a hiking group for seniors and discovered muscles I hadn't used in decades. I signed up for a pottery class I had always been curious about but never made time for. Slowly, I began to discover who Paulette Hamilton was beyond her role as Jacob's mother, a woman with interests, opinions, and capabilities entirely her own. Jacob sent progress reports from therapy, brief messages that never pushed for more than I was ready to give. Learning about approval-seeking behaviors today, understanding how my insecurities drove my decisions, recognizing patterns from childhood that I never addressed. 3 months after the confrontation, we had our first video call. It was awkward, painful at times, but necessary. Jacob looked different. Thinner, less polished, more authentic somehow. "I've moved to a smaller apartment," he told me. "Left the firm for a position with a nonprofit legal aid organization. The salary is about a quarter of what I was making, but the work feels meaningful." "And Amanda?" I asked, unable to help myself. "She's decided to move on," he said simply. She was right to. I wasn't honest with her or with myself. We talked for 30 minutes, carefully avoiding the deepest wounds while establishing a tentative new connection. After we hung up, I cried for the first time since the wedding day. Not just for what had been lost, but for the possibility, however small, of something new being built from the ashes. I became more discerning about relationships in general. I learned to identify manipulation versus genuine communication. I established firmer boundaries with everyone in my life, expressing my needs and expectations clearly, rather than silently sacrificing my well-being for others' comfort. 6 months after the wedding confrontation, Jacob asked if we could meet in person. We agreed on a neutral location, a restaurant halfway between Portland and Seattle, where he had relocated for his new job. Seeing him in person was harder than I expected. This grown man across the table was my little boy, the child I had poured my life into raising. Yet he was also the person who had erased me from existence for his own purposes. Both truths existed simultaneously, and I had to find a way to reconcile them. "I've been thinking a lot about why I did what I did," Jacob said, after we ordered. It wasn't really about shame over our background, though. That's what I told myself. It was about control. If I invented a tragic backstory, I could control how people saw me. If I acknowledged the truth that I had a living mother with her own thoughts and feelings and perspectives on my life, I couldn't control the narrative. His insight surprised me. It rang true in a way his previous explanations hadn't. And now I asked, "Do you still need to control the narrative?" He smiled sadly. "I'm learning to live with the messiness of truth. It's harder but ultimately more sustainable than trying to maintain a fiction." As months passed, Jacob's remorse seemed increasingly genuine. He had published public retractions on all platforms where he had previously claimed I was deceased. He had informed colleagues, friends, and acquaintances of the truth. He continued therapy diligently. Most importantly, he respected my boundaries and never pushed for more forgiveness than I was ready to give. Surprisingly, I developed an unlikely friendship with Margaret Whitfield, Amanda's mother. She reached out through my lawyer, initially asking if we could meet for lunch when she was in Portland for a foundation event. "I admire how you handled everything," she told me over salads at an upscale restaurant, "with dignity and strength despite the incredible betrayal." "I had no choice," I replied. "I refused to be erased." She nodded thoughtfully. "Many people would have walked away, cut ties completely. The fact that you're willing to give Jacob a chance to earn back your trust speaks volumes about your character." Our conversation shifted to our experiences as mothers, the challenges, and joys, the mistakes and triumphs. Despite our very different backgrounds, we found common ground in our love for our children and our hopes for their happiness. "Amanda is seeing someone new," Margaret shared, "someone who seems genuine and transparent. The experience with Jacob taught her to value honesty above all else." "And Jacob is learning the same lesson," I said, "though at a much higher cost." As the 1-year anniversary of the wedding that never happened approached, I reflected on everything that had transpired and the lessons I had learned. I had learned that love doesn't mean accepting erasure, that standing up for your existence isn't selfish or vindictive, but necessary and right, that relationships built on lies will inevitably collapse no matter how beautiful the facade. Jacob and I were building something new from the rubble of our former relationship. Not the unquestioning closeness we once had, but something more balanced, more honest. He had moved back to Oregon, taking a position with a legal aid clinic in Eugene, close enough for regular visits but with enough distance to maintain healthy boundaries. During our most recent dinner together, he asked a question that showed how far he had come. "Are you happy, Mom? Not just with me, but with your life?" A year ago, I might have automatically answered yes, regardless of the truth, prioritizing his feelings over my own. But I had changed too. "I'm getting there," I said honestly. "I'm discovering who I am, beyond being your mother. It's challenging and exciting at the same time." He nodded, accepting my truth without trying to fix it or change it to make himself more comfortable. It was a small thing, but significant. The journey of rebuilding trust is long and never complete. Each day brings new challenges, new opportunities to choose honesty over comfort, truth over convenience. Jacob and I are still on that journey, taking small steps forward occasionally, stumbling backward, but always with a commitment to authenticity that was missing before. The deepest lesson I have learned through all of this is that your story matters, your existence matters, and no one, not even someone you love with all your heart, has the right to erase you from the narrative of your own life. Have you ever stood up for your right to exist in someone else's story? Or have you discovered someone was telling a different version of your shared history? Share your experience in the comments below. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the truth may be messy and complicated, but it is always better than the most convenient lie.